So this is Mark chapter 12, the scripture for January 16th. Have you ever seen a football team suddenly turn on the jets and kick it into a higher gear like they could never be stopped? Or perhaps a basketball player having a game in which this person seems never to be able to miss, no matter where they shoot it from in the entire court. I think this is kind of what Mark 12 is for Jesus, where he gets peppered with questions from a variety of different opponents and never misses, and in fact renders judgment in such a way that causes his questioners to leave stunned and surprised and the crowd to rejoice. So first, he puts the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes that we ended last chapter with, he puts them on blast with a parable discussing a vineyard that the owner of the vineyard left in the hands of tenants, and how they over and over again killed those who the owner sent to check in on the tenants. This is a not so veiled critique about how the Jewish people have handled prophets, have handled those who've represented God to them, and how they will handle Jesus once he makes his messiahship plain. After this, some Herodians speak with him. Now, Herodians were powerful Jews who supported the king at that time, King Herod. The Roman Empire allowed for kings to reign in certain regions so long as they answered ultimately to Rome and they gave taxes to Rome. And so the Herodians were people who were highly invested in keeping King Herod on the throne and in keeping the Roman emperor happy with King Herod and how King Herod was ruling his province. So they asked Jesus a question designed to trap him, asking him basically, do you support taxes? If he says yes, the people are going to get irritated with him because nobody likes taxes. But if he says no, well, Herod and the emperor will have some words with him. And they're asking this to Jesus because they've got an agenda. And so Jesus basically calls out those who try to rule the church by means of the state and those who try to rule the state by means of the church. He allows for each of them to have their due. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, he says, and give to God what is God's. After this, some Sadducees confront Jesus next. Sadducees were the priestly royalty at this time in Judaism. That's where the old money was, and they had some interesting beliefs, at least to our eyes. They denied the resurrection, and they denied most anything supernatural. And because they denied the resurrections, that's why they're sad, you see. That's how we can remember what the Sadducees buy into, what the Pharisees buy into, and so on. Like other questioners who try to sort of outflank Jesus, they don't ask their question directly, but they try to set up Jesus to say something, to put his foot in his mouth. Just like other questioners who try to outflank Jesus, Jesus blocks their attempt to outflank him, and then he answers the question that they really wanted to know his answer to, and answers them directly. In this case, Jesus blocks their question about levirate marriage, which is the practice that the Jews participated in, where if a man died, his brother would take his wife and would have children by her, so that they could pass on the name of the brother who had died. You can read more about that in the Levitical law in the Old Testament. But Jesus answers that question briefly and then takes some time to talk to the Sadducees about the question that they really wanted to know his answer to, and answers them directly. Then the one scribe who has a conversation with Jesus after this is the only person in this chapter who asks Jesus a direct question that he actually cares about the answer to. He's the only one who has enough respect for Jesus to ask him this and to listen to Jesus' answer. And perhaps if more scribes did this, they wouldn't receive the criticism Jesus levels at them. Do you approach Jesus more like the woman approaches giving to the church at the end of this chapter, where you give over your entire livelihood to Jesus? Do you approach Jesus like the scribe here who asked Jesus an earnest question? Or when you approach Jesus, are you hoping to trap him? And are you hoping to try to get him to play for your team, to play on your side? I think how we approach Jesus really matters, and how we approach Jesus is going to color the response we get from Jesus. When we approach Jesus in earnestness, hoping to hear something we don't already know, Jesus will respond to us with grace. That's all for Mark chapter 12. Tomorrow, January 17th, we'll look at Mark chapter 13. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.